Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Dore, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends. Are you ready for this episode? So we are going to be talking about the Grape Variety Palomino. It truly has a reputation for being low acid, maybe even a little bit flabby. It's low in sugars. It's quite neutral. It's easy to oxidize. This certainly doesn't sound like an interesting grape variety. Yet, there are certain people in the wine industry that are true believers, like my guest today, Christina Rasmussen. She is a wine writer, speaker, and has even made her very own still Palomino wine. And why? Because now, more than ever, there are these talented winemakers working with old vine Palomino and making wines with depth, with soul, the quiet type in the room, the one that, you know, when you finally sit down with them and you ask them some questions, you find out they are the most interesting at the party. So I'm fascinated to pick Christina's brain to hear more about her love for this grape variety and her love for farming, the soil, terroir. So she will be talking about some of her wine projects and how she brings the winemaker's story to life. And then we will be discussing Palomino and all the winemaking steps that she took to make her very own still white wine. I certainly hope you find this episode as interesting as it was for me to record. Don't forget, there is a transcript should you not hear fully the wineries that she recommends, and you can find that link at the top of my show notes. So pour yourself that glass and enjoy. Okay, so Christina, I want you to tell everybody what we were kind of talking before I pressed the record button of how Burgundy seems to be the area that's inspired your wine journey. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so I studied French at university down at the University of Exeter and have always loved France. I've always loved language. I'm actually Danish, so my first language is Danish.
Of course you are. Okay, yes. So it's 3 languages in the bag.
Yeah, I wish Spanish as well, but maybe one day, maybe Italian too, but we can't do everything.
Not everything in a day, yeah.
And so I was studying French, and on my year abroad, I decided that I'd really love to do an internship. But at the time, I guess like many young people, I didn't really know what I wanted to do for my career. Mm-hmm. So I started looking at various jobs ranging from fashion to law, applied for several things, didn't get several things, and actually saw an advert for one winery, which I didn't get. But I did get an internship with another winery, LITTLEWINE. In Burgundy, yes.
It's not a bad one. Yeah, they have enough vineyards, enough wines coming out. Yeah, okay.
So I packed my bags at 21 years old and moved to Beaune, where I had never been before. And of course, I'd drunk wine before, but I'd never really sort of sat down and studied Burgundy. And that's where it all really started. I just became very quickly obsessed and went straight down the rabbit hole. And I think for me, the initial thing that pulled me under really was the notion of terroir and how one vineyard can produce a wine that tastes so drastically different to the wine made from the vineyard next door. Of course, at that stage, I had still very basic knowledge. So I hadn't even considered all of the multiple other factors that play into terroir other than just soil type. But down the line, I sort of fell deeply in love with farming. And I think, the way that we can farm and tend a vineyard will also drastically impact its taste. So it's a never-ending journey of exploration, working in wine and meeting winemakers and spending time in vineyards. And I guess I owe all of that to those early days in Burgundy.
It's a beautiful start into the wine industry. I mean, when you were doing the internship, what were you learning? What were you responsible for?
So initially I was there for 7 months, and the first month I was really just shadowing my 2 bosses just to learn and take on board as much as I could. And then I was really managing a lot of, no, not managing, but interning with regards to making sure that all of the mentions in the press had been taken out so that I could store them all into a file and then relay that information to the management team. So whether that was articles on Latour or whether it was tasting notes, I very quickly got an in-depth look at the sort of wine media landscape.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And that's really what forged what I did next, because I then went on to work in wine PR and communications and consultancy in London for 5 years.
Okay.
Because I knew that I loved to work in wine and I knew that I sort of had a grasp on PR. So when it came to that stage, I really just sort of Googled wine PR London, not even knowing if that was a thing.
But it was.
But it was a thing. And I emailed 2 firms and one got back, well, they both got back to me. One said, we can't take on any interns at the moment. But the other one said, oh, well, yeah, please come in and have a chat. And that was Sue Harris, my old boss, who has Westbury Communications.
Okay.
And so I interned there. And then from then on, I worked there for 5 years, going from junior account manager, or junior account executive rather, up to account director.
And was it there that you started writing? Because writing now about wine is a huge part of your life.
Yes, exactly. So ever since I've been a child, I've wanted to be a writer. I actually used to write these little like novellas when I was like 8 years old.
I would love to see that.
I know.
Read one of them.
They're actually all about horses.
Interesting. Okay, so you, again, the connection with the outdoors, it was there from the beginning.
Yeah, always
Love
nature
farms.
obsessed. Yes, love farms, love being outside, love animals, love anything that's nature related. And yeah, I knew I wanted to be a writer, but by the time I decided I wanted to work in wine, I didn't really know how to even get into wine writing or whether that was even sort of a thing at a more junior level. And I also knew that I just really wanted to get as much experience as I possibly could and as much knowledge before I really started to write so I could form my own opinions. Yeah. So I started a wine blog must have been about 2015, which at the time was actually called Vintage of All Kinds, because I was also writing about vintage fashion.
Oh, okay.
Although that was really only probably 3 or 4 blog pieces, because I don't have the same passion really as I do for wine.
It slowly disappeared, yeah.
Yeah, wine took over my life.
Bottle by bottle.
Exactly. And so it quickly rebranded to just my name. Mm-hmm. And during that time at Westbury, when I was still working in PR and consultancy, I was blogging sort of in all of my spare time, so in evenings and on weekends. And my boss knew that I love writing and that's what I ultimately really wanted to do. So she actually incredibly gave me a leg up and introduced me to the team at the Buyer. And
wow, okay.
Yeah,
nice
so I started to write a bit for them, and yeah, I really enjoyed that process, and also started to write a little bit for other people's websites such as Le Cave de Purenne. I wrote a piece on Beaujolais Nouveau back in, I think it was 2016 or 17. And yeah, slowly but surely writing opportunities started to come by me more often, and I wrote the chapters on Canadian wine for the British Columbia for Lonely Planet after going there on a press trip for the Buyer. And yeah, I just fell so deeply in love with writing about wine that I got to the stage where I was thinking I'd love to do this full time and maybe I can make it work freelance full time. And that was kind of serendipitous timing, because that was the same moment that my 2 co-founders of LITTLEWINE approached me with the idea of what would become LITTLEWINE.
Shall we talk about LITTLEWINE then?
Yes. So my 2 co-founders, they are Daniela Pilhofer and Peter Honegger, and they co-founded Newcomer Wines, which started from a tiny little wine shop selling direct to consumer in Box Park, and now has grown to an incredible importer representing wineries from France to Austria to the Czech Republic to Slovenia. And obviously they're very trade facing now, so the majority of the wines that they sell go directly into hospitality. But they had always wanted to do something that was more in the content space and the education space. Yeah. Especially just because it's an area that neither of them came from wine. They are both self-taught. And they found that there's just sort of a lack of resources that bring the winemaker to the forefront, because they, like I as well, have learnt so much of our knowledge directly from the winemakers. But we're very lucky and fortunate to be in a position to do so. whereas so many people might not get that FaceTime or that one-on-one time with winemakers. So that was really always our goal from the beginning, was to bring the winemakers to the forefront. And so we started as a content platform back in April 2020, very much winemaker centric. So I was profiling winemakers from all around the world, always via either going to see them or interviews with them, so that I can best put their stories in their own words, really, but via sort of me as the vehicle. Yeah, the goal is just to put their thoughts, their philosophies, their ideas, and everything that drives them to the forefront, with less scores. We don't score or anything like that. We do sometimes write notes, but we try and always contextualize them and make them very fun. And so initially we were also a bottle shop and wine club, but we quickly realized that actually we wanted to focus much more on the content and the education, and that we don't see ourselves as becoming a wine shop at all. So we stopped selling wine, and we're now building a new platform, which we're very excited to actually start trialing in just a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, so when this is out, everybody, it should already, well, potentially might be ready.
Yeah. And it's going to be a platform that enables winemakers to communicate about everything that inspires them. So they can upload photos, videos, actually map their vineyards, all of these things that just bring to life their domain in a digital sphere.
Oh, that's amazing.
And on the other side, it will be a hospitality training tool, be able to train your staff to learn about the wines that you're pouring directly from the source, bottle by bottle. So that's the goal. We spent almost a year and a half researching it, and speaking to people in hospitality and speaking to winemakers to make sure that we're building something that's really valuable and that enables people essentially just to travel directly to the vineyards, but digitally.
No. I mean, flights cost quite a bit of money and they get cancelled all the time these days. So.
And of course our CO2 footprint too, which we must take into account.
Sorry, I meant that first. That was the first thing that came to my mind. So this platform that you're about to trial, that's going to be for hospitality. Is there still the original website that a consumer could go and just really dive deep into understanding the farming life and of these winemakers? Yeah.
So when we launched, so everything's kind of just shifting around in terms of the website, how it currently is. So when we launched, we had a content subscription that everyone could sign up to. And within that were the long format profiles I've written on now 160 plus winemakers, which ranges from like 1,500 words to 3,000 words, with photography, sometimes documentaries as well. So we've made 12 documentaries with winemakers.
Oh, that's fun.
And all of that is going to shift online to an editorial platform, which will be free for everyone to access. So that's sort of really our storytelling narrative also for consumers.
Lovely. Good. Everyone go across to Little Wine so you can know a little bit more about what's behind the bottle. So if you were flying and meeting these winemakers and to get their stories, has there been any that have really stuck in your mind? Has anything been extra special?
There are so many, and I'm so incredibly fortunate to do this for a job, and I do still pinch myself on a daily basis. I think during COVID, of course, it was very difficult for us because we launched in April 2020. And luckily I had so much content already in the bank from my previous travels. So I was able to continue putting out winemaker profiles for several months. But we got to probably July, August time, and we were thinking, okay, we're good for a few months, but what happens if this continues? And for now we could travel, because that was when borders just opened. So I got on the road for 9 weeks with just me and a hire car and a tent.
Just a tent?
Just a tent, yeah. Although I stayed with some winemakers. I stayed in the tent sometimes, and then every now and then I would get an Airbnb just so I could, properly shower if I...
Oh, I love that though. You're so free and rural. Okay, carry on telling the story. This is, actually, to be honest, this sounds a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I started all the way down in Banyuls, and then drove the way...
Right down in the south of France, okay.
All the way down on the border almost with Spain, and then drove all the way up to Champagne and stopped at several winemakers en route. And the amount of people that I met there, and just how forthcoming people are as well. That I think winemakers, it's such an honour for us to be able to step into their lives, and also for them to give us the time, because of course they're so incredibly busy and they're working in the vineyards and they have always so much to do. So for us to sort of just come in and spend half a day with them, it's really, I can't tell you how grateful I am to all of them. And from that trip in particular, one that stood out to me was Pedres Blancas. So just the most incredible domain in Banyuls, up in sort of the hillsides with very, very old vines. And it's just stunning what they're doing. And yeah, preserving the vines, but also just the most breathtaking place. And I can't even really give it justice in words. I also started to fly a drone, so I have some drone footage from there. So I definitely urge you to take a look at those. But it's a once in a lifetime kind of visit. And just seeing that vineyard, it's one of the most beautiful vineyards I've ever seen.
Wow, really? And you have been to many places. You're going to put that up there. Okay, Banyuls. It's funny. I thought you might say somewhere in the Loire, or it's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there's still so many places on my list as well, because when I tell stories, of course, it's not always from visits that I've done. So often also online via Zoom or via people that I meet in London. But one in particular that recently stands out to me was profiling Domaine Ligas in Pella in Greece.
Okay.
Meli Ligas, she's the young woman now at the head of that winery, but also the vineyards. And what they're doing in terms of permaculture in particular is just so inspiring, and I've learnt so much from her. So.
Did you say permaculture?
Yeah.
What is permaculture?
So really just working entirely in tandem with what they have naturally growing in their vineyard and in the vicinity as well.
Okay.
And also in terms of soil management. So with them, they just let the native grasses grow. Mm-hmm. And then they also do things like using chamomile in hot periods to help the vines to cool down and avoid sunburn. They also work with like a mineral that's called zeolite that's found nearby, and that actually absorbs water, so releases it slowly over time.
Interesting.
They use things like wild garlic to also bring more nitrogen to the soil in times of heat and stress. And yeah, she has such vast knowledge, and she's also just so kind, and she's experimenting all of the time, and her wines are incredible. And yeah, it's a pleasure to spend time with her.
Amazing. What wines is she producing?
So her and her family are particularly well known for bringing Reditis to the forefront, because I think...
okay.
Yeah, Reditis gets a bit of an unfair rep sometimes in Greece, and they've really proved that you can make very qualitative and fine wine from Reditis. But they also make an incredible Pinot Mavro. So they make a direct press like a Blanc de Noir. They also make a very light and juicy and just delicious almost like a Beaujolais style of Pinot Mavro. And then they make sort of the more structured Pinot Mavro. I mean, it's such a chameleon grape. It can really do everything. They make an amazing Asiatico. They're also working with various other lesser known indigenous varieties. And yeah, they're well worth checking out.
Amazing. And of course, quite clearly, as you said, they're doing everything in a very holistic, natural way. So the permaculture is taking maybe little bits of what are often used in biodynamics, but not going by the lunar cycle. That's effectively what they're doing.
Well, yeah, she also works according to the lunar cycle. So I guess...
Oh, she does as well.
Yeah. I guess what they do, it's less... I suppose many of their principles are biodynamic in nature, but they also just go sort of above and beyond and just follow their own thought processes, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also in terms of the soil management, biodynamics doesn't stipulate as much about no-till as what they're doing.
Okay, interesting. I've never tasted any of their wines, so that's one for me to investigate. Now, we're talking about storytelling. I know that you have always had a bit of a love affair with the Grape Variety Palomino. And of course, that's going to lead us on to a whole other story. So why Palomino? Can we talk about this grape variety for a second?
Yes. Well, so I love all of the great varieties of the world as well. But I think I've always been a fan of the underdog. And I think that's also part of just me being a journalist, is I always like to dig deeper and see if I can find the truth. And I feel like Palomino has often got an unfair rep in recent years when it comes to unfortified wine. Of course, when we talk about Palomino, we immediately think of sherry. It is the sherry grape, and it gives us the most incredible wines in the guise of sherry. But there are so few unfortified still white wines made from Palomino. That's changing now. There are now dozens that I can think of, but I had come across very little. And if we go back to probably about 2016 now, I had tasted the wines of Ebn Sadi, of the Sadi family wines, and Adi Badenhorst as well. So both, of course.
Just got back from South Africa, so I'm just like, it's South African wine. But yes, and you've picked some pretty cult producers, but yeah.
It's just the best. I mean, that country, it's, the wine scene over there is just electric.
Exactly. It's exciting. There's so much movement.
Yeah.
I've said to everybody since I've got back, this is just nature HD. There's a mountain and a coastline almost on both sides, no matter where you look. Nature galore.
Yeah.
And affordable luxury.
Yes.
You can actually go. I've never been anywhere in the world where I've been able to eat such good food or stay in such good places and feel like I'm still saving money.
And just, I mean, the nature is just incredible. The native fauna and flora and the shrubland that exists there. And when I was there, I took a photo of a malachite sunbird and I was just in heaven.
Oh, we had to skid around baboons on one of the main motorways.
Yeah, I actually saw a lynx in broad daylight.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, now that is a thing for the tick list. Not many people can say that.
We were with Ebn Sadi, and we were driving to see the old Tavudpad vineyard. Which incredibly vines planted at the beginning, starting from the late 1800s. And we saw a lynx in broad daylight, and wow. I mean, that's a once in a lifetime spot in the vineyard for sure. Mm-hmm. But
going back to Eden Sadi, so you're tasting the Palomino wines.
So I tasted the Palomino from Ebn Sadi and Adi Badenhorst. Of course, the famous one from Ebn is Scorpion, and that's actually 50-50 Palomino and 50 Chenin. Whereas Adi makes his Soetvandi Adi, which means salt of the earth. That's 100% Palomino, and that comes from the same vineyards as Scorpion up on the west coast of South Africa.
Okay.
So I had tasted these two wines and loved them both.
Why?
I think particularly, particularly the salinity. I love salt.
Okay.
There was just something that was so heightened in that expression in those wines that I hadn't experienced before. And it was just, they were wines that, I mean, especially back then, they were a little bit easier to find, that I kept coming back to whenever I could. If I saw them on a wine list, they were the wines I would gravitate towards. And it had sort of already made me aware of the fact that Palomino was interesting. Mm-hmm. And then shortly after, I first had the wines from Envinate and Suertes del Marqués.
And I've just done a podcast on Tenerife, actually.
Oh, awesome. Can't wait to listen to that.
Yeah, I was just tasting, obviously, the Seven Fuentes. It's not their top wine, but as their level entry, my God. And when we talk about volcanic wines and this kind of almost sulfurous nose, they're all of them.
They're so unique.
So different. So, Yep. So you're tasting their wines.
Tasted those wines. And the first one that I actually had from Envinate was the Benji Blanco. And I was just completely blown away. It was sort of one of those, I've had several of these jaw drop moments in wine, but that was one of the top 5. And I couldn't believe the wine. It was just so expressive in that salinity, but also so incredibly light on its feet. It had almost this sort of ghost-like structure, and it actually did haunt me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The kind of wine that I was waking up and thinking about. And so I started researching those wines and discovered that Listan Blanco, which they're made from, that's actually Palomino. And so I was like, okay, yes, this makes sense.
This grape is haunting you in general.
Exactly. And they all come from old vines as well. So
yes,
I really figured there must be something with Palomino in its old vine structure, its old vine form, that produces something so inherently special. And of course, it's a very old grape variety. And records in Spain suggest that it may well have been planted as far back as the 1100s, possibly before. We don't really know. Of course, we've lost a lot of the actual documentation. And of course, we have no way of genetically proving that. But we know that it's very old. And as such, firstly, because of course, it was around, but it was also very popular. A lot of the material was brought to South America and up to North America as well, as well as, of course, across to South Africa. And so I started just thinking in my head, there must be more old vineyards around of Palomino. Didn't know how to find them though.
Yeah. So how did you discover these old vines when considering Palomino is not something that is massively talked about?
Yeah. Well, so I had decided at this stage, so we're now talking about maybe 2018, that I wanted to go and actually take a mini sabbatical and go and make wine, because that was my biggest hole in my knowledge, but also just because I'm so passionate about wine that I just gravitated naturally towards wanting to actually get my hands in wine.
In that soil. Dirty. Get your hands dirty.
Exactly. And so I reached out to a friend of mine, Abe Schoner, a winemaker who has the Scolium Project, but also more recently the LA River Wine Company. And I asked him whether I could intern with him. And he, to my great surprise, said yes, because I had no experience. And I was thrilled with that. So I knew that I was going to be going over there for harvest in 2019. And around the same time, I went over to Sonoma on a press trip and was tasting at a sort of a big group tasting, and came up to the table of Klein Vineyards and was tasting with Megan Klein and tasted their Farmhouse White Blend, which is a blend of several different white grape varieties. But she said...
And wait, I bet there was Palomino
exactly.
in there. I'm getting it. I'm understanding what's happening here.
Precisely.
How much percentage was in that blend?
Only a small amount.
Okay, all right.
But she said we have this very historic old vineyard called Bridgehead Vineyard. And Bridgehead's in Contra Costa, and it mainly has Zinfandel, but it also has some Mataro, which is what actually made the Ridge Mataro once upon a time. And it also has a tiny bit of Palomino and a little bit of Muscat. So I was mind blown at this discovery.
You'd found your Palomino vineyard.
I had. And Megan's my age as well. So we just really bonded in that moment. And we've spoken about it since. And we were like, there was just something special about that moment.
Yeah.
And so I plucked up the courage to firstly ask Abe. I was like, this is very cheeky of me, and I can't quite believe I'm asking this, but if there's any chance that I could make just a barrel of wine while I'm working with you, would that be possible? And I honestly had to pluck up so much courage to ask that, because I thought that I thought there was maybe no way, and he shocked me and by just saying, of course you can. I mean, he's one of I owe so much to him. He's one of just the most supportive and welcoming people, and has helped me so much. And
beautiful. He
said, but you have to find the fruit first. And I said, well,
yes. Funny you say that.
Yeah, about that. I might have found some. So I emailed Megan and I said, just on the off chance, of course, no pressure, but is there any possible way that I could buy just half a ton or whatever you'll give me of Palomino grapes to have a go at making my own wine from these incredible old vines? They're planted in 1935. Okay. On their own roots. And she said yes.
That's amazing.
That's how it came about.
So your own wine started. Can we stop for 1 second and look at Palomino in terms of the fact that everybody describes this grape as just a neutral grape variety, and also it doesn't have that high acidity. So for anybody who is reading on paper about Palomino, they would listen to this podcast now and think, Christina is really crazy. Why does she want to make 100% Palomino when it's neutral and not great acidity?
I mean, I think a lot of people probably think I'm totally crazy, but I'm okay with that, especially when it comes to the English vineyard as well. I get a lot of funny looks. But I mean, of course, it has this reputation as being neutral and as being low acid, but I think it's much more complex than that. And I think when we talk about neutral, and I also use that term a lot, I think we actually do a disservice to what that grape is capable of. And it's the same really with Chardonnay, because Chardonnay is quite neutral. It doesn't have an awful lot of flavour on its own. Of course, it has some green apple, some lemon, but generally speaking, it is more on the neutral spectrum. Yet, of course, Chardonnay gives us some of the greatest white wines in the world, and I think that neutrality actually acts as a vehicle for it being able to express where it's grown very clearly. It's almost like it's a mirror to what it's being grown on, and I do feel the same way about Palomino. We just, of course, don't have enough examples yet for us to really compare Palomino from different soils, different climates, different places, different people. We are getting there, and I would love to host a big Palomino tasting at some stage, because I can probably think of about
and I'm
30
sure you
examples.
Will.
Yeah. But I think just having tasted these wines, the South Africans and the ones from Tenerife, despite the fact that Palomino has, in inverted commas, low acidity, they all gave the impression of having acidity. And I think that comes more from that saline aspect of the wine. I am looking into it as well, because I think there might actually be a different proportion of like malic acid versus tartaric acid in Palomino. So it's known for being low in malic, but I think there is quite a lot of tartaric. Yeah, exactly.
So it appears to have the higher acidity. Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think as well that the vines, as they get older, the acidity level slightly changes?
Yeah,
as well,
yeah. And I mean, the clusters for my wine and the clusters of Palomino I've seen, they are often huge, but the berries have quite thick skins.
I've seen a picture of you with your Palomino
Yes, like the
berries
size
on
of
the
my
blog
head.
when you've written it. Oh my God, they are insane and like hanging down. Huge. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I interrupt you, but I got excited because those berries were rather large.
But pretty thick skinned. And so I think all of that sort of salty goodness lies within the skin. And if you're working in a way where you allow that to come to the forefront, that gives this impression of freshness, and almost like when you're out on a boat and you have that sea air, that's sort of really what I feel in the wine.
Oh, I love it.
So I feel like we need to not always be so quick to judge what's on paper in front of us, or analysis as well. Because I mean, my analysis, the pH it's pretty high, but the wine doesn't feel like that at all.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that sort of really drove me to just explore it a little bit more. And especially because it is such an underexplored style, underexplored wine, I really felt that I could do something that maybe tasted unique. Whereas, of course, if I want to try and replicate an amazing Chardonnay or an amazing Pinot Noir, I'll always feel, okay, what am I really contributing? Especially given that I am not a winemaker, I wanted to do something that really was sort of uncharted.
Love it. You said about how you think maybe this salinity is trapped in those thick skins. So I'm assuming then you did some prolonged skin contact with the grapes?
Yeah. So I actually I looked into how Envinete used to make their Benji Blanco. They've actually they've since changed it so that the wine now has a floor component. But before that, it didn't.
You haven't made your wine with any
floor?
No,
I decided not to do any floor on this wine, just because I really wanted to see the vineyard kind of in its naked state.
Yes, without adding that yeasty flavours.
Yeah, although I do love floor wines. I think, of course, that's what Palomino...
I got the feeling when you were talking about sherry, you got quite excited anyway. So yes, quite clearly. But okay, so no floor. So how did you go about this wine?
So Abe and I drove up to Contra Costa to meet Megan and a team of friends, and we picked the vineyard together on the 13th of August 2019, and then we drove the fruit down to LA. And once we got to LA, I foot stomped probably about 90% of the grapes, just to break the skins and to get some juice flowing so that we could put it in the basket press and press easier, but also just to release some of that goodness within the skins.
Okay.
And then,
and why 90% and not 100%?
Because I wanted to do a tiny bit of skin contact as well.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I then pressed that juice and we moved it into an old barrel where it's just fermented naturally. And then with the 10%, I destemmed by hand. And Abe was laughing at me in the corner like, oh, wow, this is going to take a long time.
Thankfully, it's a small
project.
project.
And thankfully it was before any of our other fruit had come in. So we had time at this stage.
And I think I've seen a picture of that fruit in a demijohn, right? Looking exactly like Brussels sprouts.
So funny. So
I'm jumping ahead. I'm sorry. I'm ruining the story.
No, not at all. So I put these berries into a glass demijohn, immersed it in juice. And there they sat for 8 weeks and fermented, and then eventually that got blended into the barrel. And then from there on, so the biggest issue with the wine is that I didn't quite get the yield that I thought that I would in terms of juice.
Did you get a lot less?
A little bit less. I think because Palomino is quite pulpy. But also because it was very early on in us using this press, we hadn't quite yet figured out exactly how to get the best amount of yield out of the press. So I probably ended up with a little bit more of like essentially kind of free run light pressed versus the heavy press. But I think that's actually just made it into what it was meant to be.
So has that added elegance, do you think, to the wine?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
But so the barrel wasn't quite full. Which was driving me crazy because I wanted to make it in a reductive way, and so that meant that the barrel needed to be full. So I bought so many glass marbles. I can't tell you how many marbles.
Were they just literally marbles just that like, maybe like children would play around with?
Kids' toy marbles. Yeah.
Okay.
To raise the fill level. And
that's really clever, though. I've heard of some winemakers doing that to make sure that the wine doesn't oxidize.
Exactly. It's the old method in Burgundy. Growers used to do this.
I didn't know. Okay. I'd love to have seen like inside the barrel with all those beautiful marbles.
It was pretty,
at the bottom. Oh. Do you have any photos?
I do actually, yeah. I'll send you some.
Oh, okay. Yes, please. I want to see them.
But so the fill level rose, but it never got quite to the top and I ran out of money. So eventually I was like, okay, I can't buy more marbles. There is no money in the bank. No. I'm just going to have to hope for the best. Aww. And miraculously came back in February and we were going down, Abe and our friend Raj Par were going down to prune a vineyard in the south of California, also a vineyard planted in the late 1800s. And tasted the wine at that moment and took the pipette out of the barrel and it was as pale as water, which shocked me. I'd been so nervous that I was going to end up with something that was very oxidative.
I think it's going to go yellow and deep,
So it's a mystery, really. I think what happened is because it was on, it was on heavy lees as well. The lees were so healthy that we decided just to, put it on heavy lees.
Leave everything.
So they've just soaked up any oxygen, really.
Amazing. Did you do any batonage? Were you stirring the lees or did you just leave all that heavy lees just at the bottom of the barrel?
It was completely left, yeah.
Yep, left to its own devices. And then, I'm assuming, is this wine unfiltered? Unfined?
Yes, unfiltered, unfined.
Of course, it has to be hands up.
We did, add sulfites. I, at the beginning, had thought, okay, I'll try and make this without sulfites because that's just sort of what I wanted to try. But it's so funny. Yeah. I mean, we can, especially in the wine trade, I think people are very quick to judge on all sorts of levels. When you're actually making your own wine, it's a whole different story. And early on in the fermentation, it had a very bizarre fermentation curve. It was fermenting really slowly. Usually wines have like a very rapid, they ferment a little bit slowly and then suddenly they'll ferment fast. With mine, it was just so sluggish. And
were you a bit preoccupied?
I was just nervous. And Abe was like, I've never seen a fermentation curve like this. Like, weird.
Wow. Okay.
And then...
Were you tempted to throw in some commercial yeast at any point? Or were you like, no, it's
I
not
would
happening.
do much to avoid that. I think if it had been stuck or anything like that, then I would have just added the bucket from another wine that was fermenting.
Okay.
But luckily it never got to that. But it did there was something in the wine that just I didn't like in terms of taste. And that was like, there was something bacterial or something going on that just made me so nervous. So after that, I was like, okay, immediately, Abe, where are the sulfites? And so we did add some at that moment. And then it was, sulfited, I think, twice more over winter, and the total sulfites are 62, so it's still pretty low.
Well, if you wanted to if you wanted to bring that to the Royal Wine Festival, you'd totally be fine. I think, isn't it 70 parts per million of sulfur, and you're fine.
Yeah, but I'm so glad that I did that because the wine is better for it, definitely.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think sulfur gets a really, really bad
It really
rap,
does,
obviously. Yeah. It is there to protect the wine. And if you are going to put all your love and soul into a project and then have it entirely oxidize or have a bacterial spoilage and for it to taste, for me, a wine should not taste like a mouse.
I know.
There are some people that love their natural wine and like, it's great, it's furry. For me, not so much.
Yeah, well, I adore, there are so many natural wines that I adore. And I mean, what do we even mean by natural wine? But for me, there are so many no sulfite wines that some of my favorite wines in the world are made in that way, and that truly take my breath away. And if I'm able to make wines like that, then I definitely will. But I also think we ultimately have to want to, well, me anyway, I can't speak for everyone. I wanted to make the purest wine that was true to the fruit that it came from and the vineyard. And that was just how this wine went. So who knows, maybe in the future I'll manage to make one without sulfites. But yeah, I think it's just, I take it wine by wine.
You have to let the grapes speak, I guess, right? That's the whole point. If you are minimal intervention and you want to have the truest, purest example, the grapes will tell you what they need, I guess. So you need to be flexible.
Yeah.
So you have this wine. What did you call it?
So I called it the Alley for multiple reasons. Firstly, the vineyard's actually shaped kind of like an alleyway. It's very, very long and it has an old train track on one side and then like a road and houses on the other side. Plus then also alley is actually the old English word for marble.
That's brilliant. That
I know.
I love. Mm-hmm.
So funny. And plus it's just sort of a nod to my own journey in wine. So my own alleyway, my own pathway.
Oh, that's beautiful. And now, how does this wine taste?
So it ended up tasting really how I'd hoped that it would taste. It has that lovely salinity, and on the palate in particular, it's so salty. And I think that's because I did that little, that 10% of skin contact, I really think brought something incredible to the wine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It has this interesting round mouthfeel, which I think is a nod to the desert sands and also the heat of Contra Costa, where it comes from. So it's almost like you get like a lick of sunshine in the wine without the alcohol. It's only 12%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it has this really interesting mouthfeel that I love. And I think it's
like a brightness and a texture.
Definitely.
Brightness, texture and salinity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love it. How many bottles did you produce?
Just 202.
And some people in the UK can actually purchase some, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's all been sold. It's sold out now, but there is some still. Yeah. I mean, I'm still blown away and so grateful to everyone that supported me on it. Mm-hmm. But there's still some available in Noble Rot. There's some in the Mulray and Evelyn's Table.
So that's amazing. So for anyone living in London, if you want to go out, you can find it on their list. But is there any to actually purchase for home?
Sadly not, no. But there's also some at Sager and Wild if anyone wants to go to a wine bar. But yeah, it's sadly all gone now. Yeah.
No. But you know, the amazing thing is just actually listen to your journey and your decisions, and to know that you're an advocate of this great variety that should get more praise.
Yeah.
So what did you learn on your journey of this winemaking experience?
I think more than ever, I just learned again about humility and taking every day as it comes and being open to learning. And I think that's the greatest thing that we can take from winemaking is just there's always something new that happens. There's always something unexpected. There's always new decisions to be made. I mean, on that journey, of course, we also made all of Abe's new wines from the LA Row Wine Company.
Yes, of course you did, yeah.
And it's just every single fermentation is its own beast, and it's just incredible. You're really working with something that's alive in terms of bacteria, yeast, everything coming together to create something that is so, that we all love. And I think just being able to take all of that in, and then also understanding how to react to each fermentation. So of course, some fermentations are delightfully easy and you don't even have to worry. Other ones you have to cool down. Other ones you have to rescue. We literally had to rescue one.
How did you rescue it?
It was quite incredible. It was another Palomino.
Oh, Palomino, of course.
that Abe and I had discovered the vineyard in Fresno, this amazing biodynamically farmed vineyard since the 1800s in the most unlikely location. And the wine, it just wasn't fermenting, and it was definitely because we had put it into the cold room too soon. Mm-hmm. So it just didn't have a chance to take off. And very quickly it started to really smell like acetate. Oh no. And we were sort of like, okay, let's try and just take it outside, let it warm up. And it just, it started getting, it was just taking a nosedive. And Abe, who is generally the most optimistic person that I know, he turned to me, looked across the grapes, and he just said to me, I think we might have lost it. And I said, no.
Please say your goodbyes.
No. So we decided to press it and hope that would sort of, help everything to, it was skin fermented at that stage, help everything to take off. It still wasn't taking off. It smelt terrible. But then we decided to add buckets of juice from a fermenting Pecorino. And honestly, so it began properly fermenting. It still smelt really bad. But 14 days later, it was amazing.
Oh, wow.
It had fully recovered, and we gave it to people to taste. And out of curiosity, we just said, what do you think? And not saying anything from our side. And they were like, oh my God, it's amazing. It tastes like, it tastes just so fresh and so saline. And we looked at each other and we were like, you would not believe that this wine was almost destined for the bin.
Wow. Oh, that is actually a rescue story.
Yeah.
Oh, which this wine that you've rescued, what name will it have if people were looking for that wine?
So that one,
so that they could purchase it.
Yeah. So that one's actually all sold now. It was 2009.
Oh.
It was 2019 Raisin City, but there is still some Raisin City 2020 in the market, which was, I believe, a perfectly happy fermentation. But
well, they can drink that and think of the story of the previous years.
Yes.
Can't they? Oh dear. Well, I tell you one thing that you've taught me me and for anybody either in the wine industry or wanting to get into the wine industry, which is if you want to do something, ask, because you've asked these people, can I intern? Can I have your grapes? Can I make some wine? And you've got yeses. And I guess it goes to show that, all of us that work in the wine industry, we definitely don't do it for the money. We do it for the love and the stories and the memories. That's what keeps things exciting. And I guess actually a lot of people really just want to share their own passion and will bring you in. So
definitely, yeah. And it took a lot of courage to ask those questions. And still now it's something I struggle with. I think as women, we often struggle more as well to ask. But really, I think just, plucking up the courage. And I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Someone says no.
There's no.
Yeah.
And you ask somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, everybody, go drink more Palomino. I think that's the message. And figure out what wine Christina's going to do next. Actually, what's the plan for your next wine? Do you have any idea? Obviously, you're going to have to wait for a yes from somebody.
I mean, I would love to make that wine again sometime, but I really want to have the full time to dedicate to it. So I don't know when that might be, but I also love to make Palomino from other old vines, but I don't know where. I need to go on some more explorations, find out where they are. Yeah, there are many ideas.
If anyone can find the Palomino, it's you.
And another wine I'd love to give a shout out to as well, actually, is the wines coming from Muchada Leclapa.
What?
So,
what did you just say?
Muchada Leclapa.
Okay, Muchada Leclapa. Okay.
So a winery, they are really sort of reimagining what can be done with dry, unfortified Palomino from the vineyards around Jerez. And they really are just game-changing.
Perfect. And they exist and they haven't sold out. So everyone, don't be disappointed. You can buy their wines.
Yes.
So if you enjoyed listening to Christina tell us all about her winemaking decisions to make her Palomino wine, you will love next week. We will instead be going out of the winery as Christina has planted her very own vineyard in England. And it is fascinating what decisions she's made in trellising, in her choice of the grape varieties she's planted, all of her decisions, many of which go against the grain. What's more interesting is how she explains all of her thinking. So if you want to get closer to the land and to the soil, feel it beneath your fingernails, well, almost, you are going to love next week. Let me finish with a wine quote, and this one is from Benjamin Franklin. The discovery of a wine is of greater moment than the discovery of a constellation. The universe is too full of stars. Maybe your next big discovery could be Palomino. So, wine friends, that is it for today. Please, if you are still listening at the end of this podcast, I would be so grateful for you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. This makes the podcast more discoverable for others, and it is the best way to support my work. Share it with your wine-loving friends, and do take a moment to drink authentically, inquisitively, and search out that wine story. Have a wonderful week, and until next Monday, cheers to you.